Customs Union at a larger scale. Promote sustainable and inclusive socio-economic development, gender equality, and structural transformation of state parties. Enhance the competitiveness of state parties' economies within Africa and globally. So, in summary, like I said, it is just for anyone that is being asked of what AFTA seeks to do. You just know that it seeks to create a single market for African commodities, liberalize trade, and to industrialize the state parties.
Thank you so much. Over to you, Dr. Bebiji. Please, can you tell the audience, what are the legal and institutional framework that govern the operation of free trade zone in northern Nigeria?
Thank you very much, Anesi. My co-panelists, Alpha, Aisha, and Ben. Thank you very much, the audience. Yes, this is a very important question, but let me actually lay a foundation. In an age where actually Nigeria's economy is trying to be open to the world, receptive to, receiving actually imports, and then also it has always been the drive of every government to ensure that it pushes and encourages exports by providing incentives. What if I told us that there is a law, a regulatory framework that provides for a framework whereby absolutely on zero actually tax, zero incentives, in fact, everything that is actually, every transaction that is done within that free zone is actually free of charge. You will not pay government any tax. I'm sure the tax expert here is here. So there's a legal framework, and this law has always been in existence even before the return of democracy. So the first law that actually governs this is actually the Nigerian Exports Free Zone Act. Now that law is not just, does not just provide the legal framework, but it also establishes the authority itself that administers this act. So under that law, it is very clear that operators actually can obtain licenses, and then also that same law regulates the activities of these operators, and then also actively facilitates actually investments. In fact, Section 8 of that particular law approves that all transactions in that free zone is exempt from federal, state, and even local taxes. So Section 13, because as we get on with the discussion, we understand that this law is not just a law that is enacted to be dormant. It's a law that is enacted to ensure that there is a push. Activities are actually sustained and maintained in such a way that the authority itself is granted the power to even revoke licenses. Now, in Nigeria, well, we barely have about 5, maximum, 5 free zones that are active in northern Nigeria, about 2 in Kaduna. But even in those active zones, you barely actually see any real economic activity going on. So, of course, we have to also go back, if we're talking about the legal framework, to the constitutional foundation. That is because under the exclusive legislative list, only the federal government has the power to legislate on customs, to legislate on trade, to legislate also on foreign actually relations, because the ACFA itself is an instrument that has been well ratified and is in the process of domestication. So we also have to refer to the exclusive legislative list in the Constitution. Now, thirdly, we also have to refer to the ACFA itself. My friend Alpha has already introduced us to the provision of ACFA, but we all understand that the ACFA itself creates a single African market, and then also it fosters trade liberalization and removes trade barriers. And this means that whatever it is that is contained in AFTA also will necessarily reflect in the exports actually free zones in the various zones of Nigeria. Now, the implication to the north is simply that, you see, the north, like Aisha has actually said, is actually very blessed to be located within actually the Sahel region. And in this instance, it has border to about 4 countries. And that actually gives it a big advantage. So the North should not just be focusing on imports coming from the Atlantic, but also the North can also as well leverage these opportunities that actually come from the Sahel. So in that regard also, there is another law that we also need to actually pay attention to. That is the Oil and Gas Export Free Zone Act. Of course, we may be saying that the North generally does not have oil, but with the prospects in Kolmani and the oil and gas deposits, particularly in that place, and in any case, the free zone does not just regulate, production, but also processing, even at downstream sector. And there is so much downstream activity in the north, as gateway to some of the countries like Niger Republic. We all can remember some time ago the country had to actually come to the aid of Niger Republic by sending trucks, tankers of oil and gas to actually aid it. So sorry, I know we talk too much. We are lecturers, by the way. But then there is also the Customs and Excise Management Act, of course, under particularly Section 46. That section makes exemptions and, of course, also empowers the NCS to enforce these exceptions. Also, in the current actually Tax Reform Act, we also have the provisions actually moving away from just providing, pioneer status incentives. Rather, it has now moved to encourage what we call economic development tax incentives. That is EDTI. That's giving priority to manufacturing and strict, base tax rules for free trade zones. So these free trade zones will benefit from